Okay, it looks like we've started. Thanks. So this is April 2nd, AKV3, and I want to welcome everyone to the meeting. As I've mentioned before, we don't have a land acknowledgement at this point, so I just want to acknowledge that we don't have a land acknowledgement, that it's one of the tasks for us to develop, but it's not there yet. And want to invite you to spend a few minutes and dive into the question of what's next for Alaska. We'll do just quick introductions as we've done before, and anything interesting you've picked up in the last week about signals about the future of Alaska and some of the discussions you may have had with friends or something that's given you some greater insight to where we're going. And Elijah, if you wouldn't mind jumping in.
Hi, my name is Elijah Goodfarm. I'm here just to kind of help and be a part of it. I guess I really liked the writing that I think Kathy did. I thought it was a really great kind of question and putting it out there. Yeah, I thought that was really wonderful. And yeah, I'm just here to, I think that we've got a lot to look at, and in that writing exercise, it really, kind of opened up the option to, what is the kind of dystopian look of Alaska, or what is the, positive look of Alaska? And I think that both of those things are kind of in play right now. And I think it's really interesting for everybody to, yeah, just be here and converse about it. I also watched the movie Seaspiracy on Netflix, which was really mind-boggling about just ocean pollution and fishing industry and stuff. Yeah, really wonderful, informative movie if anybody's interested. But that was a signal that came up for me today, and we just live in a rapidly expanding, changing world, and I'm here to be a part of it. So thank you all for the time and energy.
Wonderful. And just for clarification, Elijah, you were mentioning the writing thing with Kathy. Are you perhaps referring to the notes that Tracy had put in the program description?
Yeah, I guess that was Tracy. I apologize for messing up.
No worries. I just wanted to stay on the same page with you. I appreciated your enthusiasm and interest in that, but I wanted to make sure I was not losing skipping a gear mentally. Good morning, Andrea.
Mm-hmm.
Good morning. So this week, I've been really spending a lot of time thinking about just entrepreneurship education in general. And I had a great conversation with Margot Fliss on Wednesday about accelerators and rethinking how we go about making assumptions about what people have in their tool chest coming into the entrepreneurial ecosystem, I guess. Because both of us have observed that we seem to assume that people coming into this ecosystem have the skills to actually operate a business. And that seems to be something that has actually been a misassumption, and that an awful lot of businesses fail because they come in with a great idea and a lot of enthusiasm, but lack the basic skills to actually execute a business in real time. So, so we're rethinking that, and that's been reframed in my mind because I've been focused on making entrepreneurship accessible for people with disabilities. But now I'm thinking a little bit bigger, that I think making entrepreneurship accessible for people who don't have the advantage of either, sort of innately understanding the mechanics of running a business, or have somebody who's a partner who can be a CFO or bring that kind of business background running to the organization. So my mind has been flying around this, and part of it is because I'm teaching entrepreneurship and I'm thinking about it, and I'm really having a blast, and I can't wait to teach it again. So I feel really enthusiastic that I'm not the only one who's thinking that we need to kind of change how we approach entrepreneurship. And I think the more we can make it accessible, the more we can attract people within Alaska to see that they don't have to have $1 million idea to be successful in business in Alaska and do something positive for our economy. So, so I'm actually really excited to continue developing this idea, Kai, because I do think that it's a way to frame the future in a different light than how it has been framed sort of traditionally. So, and that's what's been kind of rumbling through my mind, and some of the undercurrents that I'm seeing this week.
That's great. Thanks, Andrea. And I just, would like to plant the seed, or maybe you're already looking at it for you and for everybody, that what you're talking about, I think, is a really critical issue, not just within the traditional sense of a profit-based business in an entrepreneurial sense, but also what we're doing in terms of trying to create an organization, what organizations like the Climate Action Coalition are doing. All these organizations that are trying to do new things are trying to work through the process of being kind of entrepreneurial in a new model around what they're trying to do that creates value. So whether you're trying to deal with climate change or build an accelerator or start a neighborhood clothing store or a restaurant, it's still the same kind of challenge that I think you're touching on that creates the capacity for us to create, new organizations, new ways of working. So I'm thrilled with the work you're doing, but it also extends beyond what somebody might think of as just a business to both the civic economy and the market economy, and the capability that we have to be able to see the opportunity and pursue that. So cool stuff. Margie, what's going on with you?
Well, I am gearing up for the Innovation Summit. We were accepted for a short, and we've got some really nice slides, and we're going to be presenting to our working group for feedback. So thinking about that. And I did attend the Muni's launch of the commercial property assessed clean energy yesterday. So pretty neat options for not just building owners, but also renters to access loans so that you can save money on efficiency and renewables with no money down. These upgrades benefit, pay for themselves and benefit people and planet. So it's kind of an amazing opportunity that the municipality has made available pretty much with the lowest fees of anywhere in the nation to really get this going. So I think that they'll probably post the recording of the webinar to that website that I just linked if they haven't already. Shayna and Melanie did an awesome job, and I'm really excited to see where that goes.
Cool, thanks.
And then Margie, I use she, her pronouns, and I am in Degaycock, Anchorage.
Thanks for that. I'm just getting this in here. Well, I got a chance to spend a few minutes in that before having to run off the office hour yesterday. It looked interesting. Kitty, what's happening?
Life is pretty good. I think in the things that signals of the future, having been just out in pretty rural area and listening to the radio, the one-way radio out there, which is kind of your news source, and visiting with friends, I'm struck by the microeconomies that some Alaskans are being able to really make work. And that I've been, we've all probably noticed the whole real estate thing, like you're talking about property up there, Trapper. Like people really are taking advantage of our beautiful space and finding ways to make a very comfortable and creative life out there with whatever economics that they can generate. So some are doing that, and I'm excited about it. And I just wonder, to what Andrea was saying, like, how do you, like, there's obviously a lot who aren't, and they're sort of out there rural thinking there's no jobs and don't have that creative. So like, if, as we're building this entrepreneurial ecosystem, to really think about accessing those who are further and further from the hubs is kind of an exciting thing for me, which is why I really do appreciate how more Alaskans have gotten virtual, you know, in this last year, is an opportunity. So glad to be here, and Sterling is currently content, so I'll stay.
Wonderful, thank you. Ryan, what's going on today?
Hey, good morning, everyone. It is an exciting day today. I am having a wild hair day, which is great because today is my casual Friday. And so I am rocking the casual Friday shirts. You guys get to see a majority of my wild shirts that I have, since we typically meet on Fridays. I have had a couple of exciting conversations this week. There's a few different groups that are interested in local production of food, local year-round production of food, and are considering how they could start to expand their access to that food. And so that's really exciting to hear that conversation start bubbling up a little bit. People start to be taking that seriously. The other exciting thing to me is that I had someone else mention the concept of a Mittelstand to me. And so in Germany, there's this idea of like a middle-sized company that's between 50 and 500 people. And in the German economy, that makes up the majority of their businesses. And someone else mentioned that to me as an example for what could be in Alaska. There has been in the past perhaps this perception that we just need one Google, we need one Facebook, one unicorn to come up here, and then we'll have made it. We'll be the next Silicon Valley after that. And this person said to me, well, what if we weren't that Silicon Valley? What if we were Alaska and we did things our own way? And instead of telling people that unless you have that billion-dollar idea, it's not a great idea and you shouldn't pursue it, what if we were encouraging people to start their own small things? And we had just a lot of small momentum happening. And that was really encouraging for me to hear that. I think that aligns with the work that we're doing here with AKV3 and the conversation that we've been having. So that's really exciting. That's got me pretty jazzed up.
Cool, thanks, Ryan. Pasquale, good morning.
Good morning, everybody. I apologize for not having the Zoom in, the video, the connection here is a little bit sketchy. But I guess we are all used to it. We live in Alaska, so it's kind of sometimes the usual. So everybody here have heard my 64-hour long introduction, so I'm gonna skip it, and I'm just gonna make a brief one for everybody that is looking at this video and is not familiar with this. I'm a double implant. I'm gonna call it that way in Alaska because I'm originally from Europe. Then I came to the United States, and then from the United States, from Oklahoma, I moved to Alaska. So it took me 2 steps to get to Alaska, and I've been here for quite a long time. My background is in engineering, but I'm also involved in what is service industry world. So I find that there are a lot of interesting things that those engineers can apply to service to actually make everybody's life way easier and more friendly, let me put it this way. And that connects with something that I've seen this week. I mean, it's not that I've seen it, it's just the aha moment got more brighter. It was an idea that I was toying around for a few days, few weeks, and it just seem to have come together this week with more clarity. I'm connecting with Marty was saying, with what Ryan has been saying for a long time, that we have seen a little shift from big institutions, government, big companies to individuals in terms of amount of power and amount of capacity to make things happening. When we talk about renewable energies, when we talk about energy, we see that what used to be like I'm gonna oversimplify this, what used to be like a big power plant providing energy to everybody, we're starting to see that, well, everybody can actually produce energy too with solar energy, with wind energy. So it's no longer in hands of the big but also in the small ones that are changing that are able to contribute. Then we saw in the past weeks what happened with Robinhood and the stock markets. We used to be managed by huge hedge funds, and it got disrupted by individuals put together. And then we start to seeing the same thing with also with the economy. What used to be the big guys speculating the 29 crash and everything died. Well, guess what? Bitcoin is jumping in, which I'm not gonna go if it's in a bubble or not. That's not the point of conversation. It's the point that it's making something happen and it's disrupting the small individuals. Again, thousands of small investors. And that connects with the same idea that it was said today, that maybe small companies are the ones that are going to make the big change that we're looking at in Alaska. Not as much as we think should be the government leading this, or should be the big institutions leading this, but more small individuals, small companies making a change. We had news this week that a company was bought, and that was a big takeoff. And that's a big sign that things are happening nowadays based on what small individuals do more than what big institutions do. They are both needed, but I think the power is shifting a little bit more, and I like that it's moving pretty organized, in an organized way. So that's my short for today introduction.
Cool, thanks, Pascal. The one thing I wanted to offer this week was I've been involved with a lot of the pitch competition work going on. And one of the things that really struck me was what's going on in Whitehorse. Whitehorse has submitted a couple pitches that have been accepted into the Innovation Summit. One of those is a business called Neighborly North. That's essentially, they would object to this a little bit, but think of it as an Airbnb for northern destinations. And so they're working on a business model that targets Whitehorse, Fairbanks, Anchorage, Juneau, and other northern communities for being able to provide access for travelers to areas to stay. And the second business that's in the education software area. And, you know, two things really struck me. One is both of these companies and their pitches are just absolutely friggin' world class. You know, I've gotten a chance to see pitches from all over the place over the years, and these are absolutely top notch. This is Whitehorse, Yukon, you know, next door to us, just, you know, the short distance to the east. Absolutely phenomenal what they're doing. They've got an innovation center, a building that's housing these startups or providing support for their activities. And what they're doing is just stunning in terms of the work that's going on there. And the other piece of this was to see that the Yukon folks are seeing Alaska as part of their market. And, you know, I would suggest that the thing that I'm pondering is that we should, you know, be considering and growing this partnership that even got them to pay attention to the Alaska Innovation Summit and the fact that there was that connection being made that they would apply. But also that we should be, you know, looking maybe at the discussion about Alaska, potentially in a broader context of other circumpolar and other related economies that are nearby us as part of the puzzle, and potentially also part of the inspiration, and maybe even some of the resources and skills that we might, you know, draw into some of the work that we might do in the future, recognizing the expertise that is so close, and maybe we should nurture and make it closer. So anyway, it was fun to see their work, and kind of an aha with what's happening so close to us. So I wanted to, with the time that we have, we really need to kind of jump to some key logistical kind of things and get on the same page. If we have time, I want to come back to the question I teased you with last week, which is, you know, how does this question about how long you've lived in Alaska relate? And should we keep that question, or should we do something to try and change that thought process? And I'm just wondering if anybody had thought about that at all this week, or run into any instances where that question came up of, well, how long have you been there, as some sort of credibility to your ability to be an Alaskan. Did that show up at all this week. We don't need to spend a lot of time, but I'm just curious if that resonated in some way. Ryan, go for it.
Well, and in one of my conversations, I said, I've been up here for 8 years, but the thing that I think is more important is that I plan to spend the rest of my life here. And the person said to me, well, I'm glad that you say that, because I'm not one of the Alaskans who qualifies every conversation with, here's how long I've been here. I'm really more interested in how long people are going to be sticking around to make an impact here. And so there's a mutual acknowledgement there of a little bit of a shift in perspective. And I think that if we keep pushing on that we'll just keep making that shift happen.
Great, thanks. Anybody else run into a how long have you been here discussion that somehow was establishing credibility or a different reaction like Ryan had to somebody who really recognized that wasn't what provided the credibility?
You go.
No, go ahead, Kitty.
Well, this is kind of random, but so out at our lake, the state is putting lands up for auction through staking and land sales. And some of us have been there for 30 plus years, passed on from family or something. But there's these newcomers, and we've got this fear of newcomers. And yet we met these new neighbors, and they're awesome. And we're like, if they're like these folks, it might, the trails might get better out here, and we've got more people to rely on because we're so remote. So yeah, there was that aha that newcomers can be pretty awesome. And yeah, we're not just all pedigreed by how long we've been out there. So similar to what Ryan said.
Well, and Pasquale?
Yeah, I was gonna say exactly the same thing with the US said that, well, some people that have been living here, they may have a face what looks like a more valuable opinion because they know what has been going on for a long time. But also at the same time, new fresh blood can provide new points of view, new ideas, import new approaches, or other type of contributions that nobody here thought or they didn't think it was possible. But guess what? Somebody that moved from, I don't know, Idaho, they can say, hey, actually that worked because we've been doing that in this rural area and it worked. We have to, fine tune a few things here and there, but that model works. And that's a proof of concept that we don't have here. I mean, it's hard for me to believe that everything that could be tried has been tried in Alaska. And it's hard for me to believe that all the bright minds are already here in Alaska. We have a huge amount, fantastic amount. A lot of them are here in this group. But the point is that both are valuable, and maybe we can discuss about which one is more valuable, but I think that discussion is pointless at this point. And regardless of what's the answer, I think both can contribute. And that links with what Ryan was saying, that it's not a matter of how much you can have in your belt tool, is how many of those tools you know how to use, and if you're willing to use them for a long time. Because guess what? If somebody's been living here for 50 years and they're willing to do nothing for the next 20, okay. But if somebody comes here last month and is willing to bring all the knowledge and is willing to work 100 hours a week to make this happen, well, I think we have the answer what has more value. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Cool, thanks for that feedback. Anybody else with anything on this topic?
Yeah, I just wanted to add in, I there is definitely, this is a thing, the question of how long you've been here is definitely real, and there's definitely like a validity on-off switch or something.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that, from my perspective, is, people that haven't been here, like myself, for example, that saw 20 years of growth happen in Arizona and just watched that just mega swarm of, KB homes come in, and once the numbers look right for these big corporations, they come in, they buy it up, they track it out, and they put it in. That's their business model. That's what they know to do, and they're constantly looking for that next market that hits their hits their target numbers and price opportunities and stuff and growth opportunities. And you know, so having seen that, you know, in another part of the country is really valuable, because, you know, like I'm nervous for that, you know, and I really am, you know, and I also think that within this entrepreneurial world, you know, really catering to the kind of people that we want to bring up here, you know, which to me is, you know, environmentalists and active people and, you know, conscious people, you know, kind of doing some target marketing even, you know, and some of that stuff I think is really valuable. Just another quick note on the cryptocurrency thing. I think that there's also a real opportunity in putting crypto-friendly regulations together. The U.S. is kind of on some level kicking ourselves in the foot by not really putting good regulations where, you know, it's easier for people to get around securities laws and stuff to go to different jurisdictions that are crypto friendly. And, you know, myself included, you know, I plan on opening a crypto company at some point in time. And I'm looking at it like, well, you know, it's a lot of loopholes and headaches and, you know, problems to try to do it in the state of Alaska or in the country of US, where, you know, I can just go get an international license and run it from an international place and just cut Alaska and cut America out of the pie on some level. And I think that's something that we should look at and potentially try to front run, because as I said, there's a tremendous amount of capital and innovation that's happening in the space. And, you know, creating some regulations that incentivize people to come and open a crypto business here might be something to look at least. Yeah, thanks.
All right, thanks, Elijah. So I really appreciated Ryan's point here. I think it's worth, you know, bringing it out of the chat for a second, because I realize that what he's raising is a really huge issue, which is the unintended potential consequence of this issue of maybe even being critical of the question of how long have you been here, or having it sound like it's a critical issue that might start diminishing the idea that people who have been here a long time may be just as passionate as anybody else about the future of Alaska. And I think we need to figure out how to thread that needle, on one hand, not diminishing the question of how long have you been here, but also recognizing that sometimes it is used as a credibility issue. But if we use it wrong, we could be screwing up by somehow all of a sudden negating the fact that somebody has been here and suggesting that that's that they're not as concerned about. I don't know. I think Ryan's. I'm not sure if you meant it that way, Ryan, but I think you're kind of calling out a really interesting point.
I think that just to be the contrarian, not that I have a strong opinion on this, but I think that there's the Alaskan bone in me, which is like, oh yeah, like things outside don't work here. Like it's a capital O outside. Like we have different logistical challenges. We have different stubborn challenges. Like it's not all like well-founded skepticism for things from the outside, but I think that the resentment of federal overreach and like not wanting out of touch politicians making decisions for us is pretty hardwired. And I think about working as a seasonal naturalist in Denali, it was always how many seasons have you been here? It wasn't so much where are you from? And so, yeah, I think that there's just all sorts of posturing that happens in all sorts of different contexts. And I do think what everyone's saying is important. And a different angle of this is like when I moved to Anchorage, I was always quick to say, but I'm from Fairbanks. And so there's just a ton of ways that these identity politics play out. And I think that the power question in terms of who is listened to and who has influence is very interesting.
Yeah, you make some really great points, Margie. I am very quick to say when I'm talking to folks that, well, I've been here for this period of time and I'm from the great place of Los Anchorage, kind of joking about how, Anchorage is, somewhere near Alaska. There's this balancing act that we have where in the past, and as we've looked to do different development initiatives, as we've tried to bring in outside resources, where folks just haven't listened. I'm thinking of a particular power generation or power transmission project where the folks on the ground in the community said, you can't bury the lines. We have frost heaves every spring. If you do this, it's not going to work. And sure enough, the folks that were doing the project did not listen. And sure enough, in the springtime, all the lines got severed because they're
I think we lost you, Ryan.
these initiatives that they just don't have an understanding of the local situation. But I think that part of what I'm starting to see and part of what I'm starting to grow hesitant around is that there's these embedded internal power structures in Alaska. The folks that have been here, since before the pipeline days, they've been here BP, and they are very invested in the current structures that we have. And so to consider changes that may be necessary for the future of Alaska to be successful as a state, to switch economic drivers within our state, to switch, permit structures around fisheries or mariculture, to, any of these changes means that you're inevitably going to step on someone's toes. And so, who are you going to offend? How are you going to navigate these situations and get beyond the immediate, well, you might lose a little bit of revenue next year, or this may mean that you have to put in a little extra work. But in the long term, a generation from now, this is what we're going to need to be successful as a state. And I don't have a good answer to that, but that's where some of my drive to say, well, how long are you planning to stick around comes from. Because I think if you're going to plan to, retire in the next 5 years, you may just be looking to make as much money as you possibly can, keep things running smooth in the direction that they're running, pull out as much as you can and put it into your retirement account. And then in 5 years, say, peace, see you later. And I can't fault you for that. But as someone who is going to be here for the next 20 years, like that just doesn't work for me. But I don't know how to reconcile those two perspectives. I don't know how to come together and to kind of meld that, because
Oh, we lost you, Ryan, or maybe you're finished. It paused. Were you finished, Ryan, or did we lose you?
No, sorry, I'm having a little choppy audio. That was my kind of my closing. I'm not sure how we reconcile that, but I do think we need to find that path forward.
Yeah, well, in what I wanted to reflect on there was, you've kind of got my head spinning a little bit, because I was thinking, maybe we need to change the narrative to the question of, well, how long are you staying? But, as I reflect on this discussion so far, I'm thinking, no, that's just replacing one bias for another bias, as if you're not staying for forever, then somehow you don't have standing in a discussion. And, maybe the whole thing that's putting power on, well, how long have you been here? And, well, are you from Fairbanks instead of Anchorage? Are you a real Alaskan? Or the question of, how long are you staying here? We keep putting power into some question about time here, either in the past or time in the future. And maybe all of that is just kind of coming from the wrong place, rather than trying to figure out somebody's commitment to the work to be done and the opportunity that's there and improving people's lives and communities, and maybe putting power into how long you've been here or how long you're staying. Maybe that's just the wrong place to go. I'm not
I do
sure
think there's something about the extractive nature of folks who come here to get ahead in their career and then leave. I definitely have seen that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, there's no question about that. I'm just reflecting that I'm not sure how we, if there's a different way of framing the standing that somebody has in a discussion.
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
I think that,
Well,
sorry,
ahead, Brian.
I recognize
No, go ahead.
I'm stepping on someone's toes there. You know, for me, I think that
the internet squirrels are stepping on his toes now.
is on for where your intentions are, where your energy is being focused. You know, are you focused on yourself, or are you focused on the community? Are you focused on future generations? Are you focused on building? Are you extracting, or are you adding? And maybe that's more the direction to be looking.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting way of framing it. I'm not sure that's the question, but you know, starting off a meeting saying, "Are you extracting or are you building?" as opposed to "How long have you been here?" It doesn't necessarily work quite right, but it's kind of touching on the right issue. Kitty, were you trying to pop in there a moment ago to say something?
Maybe just thinking that maybe it's something about Alaskans have a strong sense of place, and you know what is the so taking like the power dynamic out, but every person who you know to whom Alaska is an important place, they have a contribution. So like, what is the contribution to Alaska that you see as most important? And you know, so you're not trying to create this you have more of a voice than I do or something. I don't know, so I'm kind of taking off of this, like shifting away from like who has the power to being curious about the contribution, you know, so something like that, you know. So for, you know, it's, you can start with like, what's relationship to this sense of place called Alaska? And people will share, well, this is it. Well, what's your contribution to this place? You know, then you're starting to not, you're openly accessing all types, just kind of reframing it a little bit. And toddlers getting much more excitable. So I'm gonna go back to Zoom.
All right, good. Well, I've got some rough notes on this in the agenda file, and I invite folks to think about this more. It might bear some work on this issue. I think this is really an interesting thing to noodle through as we start trying to think about how to frame the discussions of the future. I think we're seeing both some strengths and some potential pitfalls depending upon how it's addressed, and potentially the risk of putting power in the wrong place. Whereas what we're really interested in is contributions and the future. So I don't know. I think it's been, like I said, my world has kind of been turned 90 degrees from the bias that I brought into this, and I appreciate it being kind of called out and discussed. But I think there's more to be done here. If there's anybody here that has a specific interest in diving into this further and trying to make something of this in terms of some clarity, I would certainly invite you or anybody that listens to this later to try and figure out how to continue advancing this thought and discussion, and how to move it ahead. Because I think there's something important here that might be building some of the kind of ethos or the foundation of how I can imagine as we move into meetings in the future, for example, and we're trying to have maybe a community meeting where we invite a bunch of folks in there. I could see the normal trend of how meetings in Alaska go, that everybody starts introducing themselves, and all of a sudden, the question of how long have you been here in Alaska comes up. And I think, what I'm seeing here is an opportunity. We need to figure this out, and to figure out how, as we invite more people in, that we invite them into a way of introducing themselves and connecting with each other and what we're doing in a way that doesn't make this error potentially of defining it by how long you've been here or how long you're staying, or other ways that put power and mix up power and contribution in a way that doesn't actually serve our purpose. Yeah, just think.
I think I'm getting something from what you just said, Kai. So I know you're trying to move on, but the idea of all that energy, effort work, labor, production, where is that going? Is it being reinvested into these communities, or is it going elsewhere? How do we close the loop in terms of nutrient cycling is how I've been thinking about this personally. But how do we keep those investments local? How do we keep that return on investment continuing to grow here in Alaska?
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's a critical issue. I've related, frequently my data point story in the Reader's Digest is that Hillcorp represents one data point that basically has removed asset control and ownership a step further away from Alaska when they took over from BP, because I was a stockholder of BP, and as an Alaskan, I could at least own a little bit of stock of BP. That is, I owned a little tiny bit of what was going on in Alaska. Once Hillcorp took it over as an LLC, I'm even more removed from being able to have influence or share a little tiny bit out of that. The other example is Bristol Bay Native Corporation that recently bought a couple processor companies and essentially moved the ownership of those companies from the Northwest back up to Alaska. So now an Alaskan corporation now owns those harvesting resources, and over that now has more control over how they're run, who staffs them, who does the repair work, as well as it means the profits from that extraction activity come into an Alaskan company to benefit Alaskans. And I think those two data points to me of what's happened in the last year really represent this fundamental fork in the road about how do we think about the future and the ownership and control and benefit that comes from the development of the resources we have here, whether they're one-time extractive resources or whether they're sustainable resources. The same question is, how much does Alaska and Alaskan communities and Alaskans benefit from that work versus it being a place for others to come and extract that profit from? All right. I'll leave it at there for the moment, but not wanting to leave it. Is there anybody here who has a particular interest in taking this issue on to kind of continue to advance this discussion and thought on this, or shall we just leave it in the notes and come back to it in the future as a question of how do we engage people in their relationship to Alaska and what we do?
So, Kai, I think that in the same way that we've kind of put energy into launching that spring writing contest, it might be worth putting some thought to before too much summer kicks in, to do some sort of a larger convening virtually, and you've got that longer list, and sort of be prepared to invite a conversation maybe along the lines of what we were talking about. So I don't know if that's already in the estimated timeline, but somewhere in the next month, 6 weeks, it'd be kind of cool to prepare for wider engagement from which people could strategic doing some of their shared, what could we do together? So just be happy to think about a design for that with y'all. And I do have to leave in about 8 minutes, sorry.
I think we all need to keep on shuffling along here. So thank you for that, Kitty, and try and wrap my head around that. Let me take just a second and touch bases with everybody, and also make sure everybody kind of knows what's happening here. In probably not quite in order, but important. First off, the writing program, I think, has largely come together. We've gotten $1,000 worth of contributions to that effort, which is kind of the minimum that we needed for the initial prizes. I've gotten the input from a couple people, and I need to go through it today and sort it out. But I appreciate the comments I've gotten from everybody on that. I'm going to take one more pass on it and then just kind of run with it at this point. Yeah, so I think that's kind of there. There's a lot of loose ends on that in terms of getting the judging and administering it, but I think the fundamental energy is there. Going to get it out on the wire and then start working on promotion of it next week, but at least get it started at this point. So that's there. It's gotten some great interest and support from the Humanities Forum and now Cook Inlet regional corporations jumped into getting interested in supporting it, and others. So that's going well. So next week is the Innovation Summit, Juneau Economic Development Corporation's Summit. And we actually have 3 presentations going on that are all kind of loosely tied with this. Ryan got accepted in with his intersection of innovation in Alaska and preparing Alaskans for Alaskan jobs, and the opportunity and the role that innovation has in that. That builds off of the panel that he organized with the Business Education Compact a couple weeks ago, and Dave Reese and that whole group. So that's fantastic. And I just saw a note from him starting to work on pulling some information out of the panelists to pull that together. Ryan, anything more you want to say on that?
I'd just like to add that if anyone in this group has perspectives on a particular industry, innovations that are happening in that industry, and how Alaskans can help to get ready for that change that's coming, please send that my way. I'm going to be, I've reached out to the panelists for their perspective, but I'm really interested in trying to gather as much perspective as possible. So I'm looking, if you've got video clips, if you've got factoids, if you've got infographics, if you've got whatever it is, please feel free to send that my way. And I will look for ways to include that into my presentation. Yeah, thanks. And I will be trying to ask the question of what's next for Alaska, and looking at that through the workforce development lens.
Wonderful. Thanks for applying and then getting accepted to do that. The second one is initially it was going to be a little wonkier one on innovation economics and why innovation matters. And I'm going to merge that together with Sarah's proposal to do an AKV3 talk. So we're actually going to do some sort of tag team presentation that's pretty similar to what you've already seen in terms of the pitch on, Alaska needs to think differently about the future, and innovation's a part of that. And so we'll be doing that talk. And then I have a third one that I'm going to be doing on a proposal for an Alaskan Innovation Coalition. This is patterned off of work going on in Calgary that brings together a bunch of separate organizations to kind of understand the broader needs and to coordinate some of those different activities around the innovation ecosystem. And quite frankly, I'm not going to brand it this way in the discussion, but right now, for lack of any other home for it, I see it potentially as a activity for AKV3 in the future to be a home for trying to bring together the discussion about innovation ecosystems and how we coordinate and link and leverage the different resources that we have. So we'll be doing those 3 presentations. There'll probably be some requests floating around in the next week for input on some of that material. The other thing that I wanted to bring to your attention is I've been invited by Yasa Thuro at Alaska Pacific University, where Andrea is also at, to put together a student workshop on AKV3. She and Stephanie Holthouse, who's the Hickel Professor of Entrepreneurship and Strategic Leadership, have seen what we're doing. And Andrea, I'm sure you're somehow mixed up in that stew of discussions and whatnot. But they've gotten interested in it. They want to engage APU students in this discussion, and they've asked that we put together a program that'll be on April 22nd. It'll be a couple-hour workshop with the APU students, engaging them. And I'm going to be looking for any sort of help that folks have on designing that session, and how to engage students and young folks that have a fresh perspective of the world and the opportunities ahead of them in that discussion. I don't know what to do with an hour and a half or 2 hours I've got, but at any rate, it's exciting to see another little data point on this discussion. And I think that's kind of the big update that I wanted to do. Does anybody have any other activities that are going on or questions about anything we've talked about so far? But from my standpoint, this stuff we're talking about is getting a little bit of attention, a little bit of momentum. And for the next week or 10 days, I'm just kind of pretty buried on trying to nurture all of this that's going on at this point. Questions, comments, or other updates people would like to share? Going once, going twice.
I guess I'll take this opportunity to do a shameless plug. I have my first art show that's coming up. I'm going to be hanging artwork at Middle Way Cafe on April 3rd, and that's going to be up until June 5th. And I appreciate any constructive or not so constructive feedback about my artwork. I'm just happy to get it up and show it. It is just about all Alaskan landscapes. And I'm just excited to show that. I love this place, and I try to show that in a few different ways. So if you happen to be passing through, check it out.
Yeah, it sounds great, Ryan. Thanks for that. And hopefully you've still got my name on one of those pieces there. I don't want it to disappear on me. I shamelessly saw what he was posting on Facebook and said, I want that one. So there, it's good stuff. Okay, well, I think we're wrapped up. I will get the recording this out for folks that weren't able to join us today, and the minutes as we've done before. We'll have the meeting. I think it's still going to work next Friday at 10 because the Innovation Summit's only in the afternoons. I appreciate everyone's time and contribution today to the discussion and look forward to more in the future. So we'll see you.